especially with the front office.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes to go find these players because they're available.
Yeah.
And is it film study? Is it calling other coaching connections? What is
all the above? Right. It's all the above. It's seeing film, watching clips, talking to contacts and connections. Bree and especially has been super helpful in this. She's got a lot of contacts overseas who have seen Kyra, for example, play a lot overseas. Teammates that she's had that are over there that have played with her, against her. Same thing with Odyssey. All three of our assistant coaches coached her in AU, so they have some familiarity with her. So it really is all hands on deck and trying to get the best person possible to fit the need at the time.
Had Kyra been on your radar previously? Like, had she been a name that came up earlier in this process?
No.
Wait, did the Indiana Fever just admit they scout players using YouTube clips? This bombshell revelation from Coach Stephanie White has fans calling for immediate changes. And what happens next could determine whether Caitlin Clark's prime years are completely wasted in Indianapolis. But before we dive into this absolute chaos, if you're a true WNBA fan who wants the inside scoop on what's really happening behind closed doors, hit that subscribe button right now because we're about to expose something that nobody else is talking about. Picture this. The Indiana Fever just spent $78 million on a state-of-the-art practice facility. They flew their front office executives all over the world during the offseason. They brought in a championship-winning coach in Stephanie White. And then, in one jaw-dropping press conference, White basically admitted they're scouting players the same way your 12-year-old cousin picks his fantasy basketball team, by watching YouTube highlights and asking friends for recommendations. I'm not joking. This actually happened. The confession came when White was asked about their newest signing, Kyra Lambert, a guard they just brought in on a 7-day emergency contract. Here's where it gets absolutely wild. When a reporter asked if Lambert had been on their radar before, White's response was a simple, devastating no. Think about that for a second. A professional WNBA franchise with one of the most marketable stars in basketball history in Caitlin Clark just signed a player who wasn't even on their scouting radar 24 hours earlier. But it gets worse. So much worse. When pressed about how they found Lambert, White actually said, and I quote, "It's seeing film, watching clips, talking to contacts and connections." She literally said watching clips, not comprehensive scouting reports, not professional evaluations. Clips, as in the same highlights you and I watch on social media while eating breakfast. The most damning part? White admitted that assistant coach Brianne January has been super helpful because she has a lot of contacts overseas who have seen Kyra play. Translation: they're relying on text messages and phone calls from friends instead of having actual professional scouts evaluate talent. It's like trying to buy a house based on your neighbor's Instagram stories instead of getting a proper inspection. And here's the kicker that should have every Fever fan demanding answers. They mentioned that their assistant coaches knew Lambert from Athletes Unlimited. For those who don't know, AU is basically pickup basketball with different rules. It's exhibition basketball at best. That's like saying you scouted someone for the NBA because you saw them at the YMCA. The level of incompetence here is actually staggering. Let's put this in perspective. Other WNBA teams have dedicated international scouts. The Las Vegas Aces have a whole department analyzing overseas leagues. The New York Liberty invest millions in player evaluation. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever are out here playing telephone with assistant coaches and scrolling through YouTube like they're trying to learn how to fix a leaky faucet. This explains so much about their recent roster decisions. Remember when they drafted Bree Hall with the 20th pick and then cut her after training camp? Now we know why. They probably watched a 3-minute highlight reel and called it a day. They could have drafted Lucy Olson, who's now thriving with the Washington Mystics, but instead they went with someone they clearly didn't properly evaluate. The timing of this revelation couldn't be worse. Caitlin Clark is in her prime. Sophie Cunningham just joined the team and is ready to contribute. Aaliyah Boston is developing into an elite player. This should be the time when the organization goes all in on building a championship roster. Instead, they're admitting they don't even have basic scouting infrastructure in place. Fans on social media are absolutely losing it. And honestly, they have every right to be furious. One fan tweeted, "They scouted based on past relationships and highlights on Twitter. You can't make this up." Another pointed out the absurdity. This organization wrote a $78 million check for a practice facility and flew their front office all over the country just to not scout. The most heartbreaking comment came from a longtime Fever supporter who said, "Get my goat away from this circus." They're talking about Caitlin Clark, of course, and it's hard to argue with the sentiment. How can you waste generational talent with this level of organizational incompetence? What makes this even more embarrassing is that Stephanie White came from the Connecticut Sun, where she had success and took them to the playoffs. She knows what a professional organization looks like. So either she's complicit in this amateur hour approach, or she's trying to sound the alarm bells about how dysfunctional things really are behind the scenes. Think about what this means for player development. If they're not properly scouting players before signing them, how can they identify the right pieces to complement their stars? How can they find hidden gems in international leagues? How can they compete with teams that are actually doing their homework? The Lambert signing itself is a perfect example of the chaos. She's played in Greece, France, Latvia, New Zealand, Slovakia, and Turkey. She averaged 15.4 points and 6.3 assists in the Greek league. Those are decent numbers. But the Greek league isn't exactly the cream of the crop in European basketball. Olympiakos, her team, got destroyed every time they played in EuroLeague competition. And the Fever didn't even know she existed until they desperately needed a body because both Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald suffered season-ending injuries. Here's what should terrify every Fever fan. White also mentioned that all 3 assistant coaches had coached Lambert in Athletes Unlimited. They're making roster decisions based on a gimmick league where the rules are different, the competition is questionable, and individual stats matter more than team success. It's like drafting an NFL player because they won a flag football tournament. The contrast with how other teams operate is shocking. Rachel Dieta, who isn't even a scout, probably knows more about international players than the Fever's entire front office. She's been spotted at games overseas, taking notes, evaluating talent. Meanwhile, the Fever are asking their assistant coaches if they know anybody who can dribble a basketball. And let's talk about Kelly Krauskopf and Amber Cox, the supposed basketball minds running this operation. They've been given every resource imaginable. The ownership opened the checkbook. They have a new practice facility. They have increased support staff. But they can't be bothered to hire actual scouts. It's organizational malpractice at the highest level. What's even more infuriating is that this isn't a money issue. The Fever have cash to burn. They just spent millions on facilities. They increased their coaching staff. But somehow, having professional scouts who actually watch games and evaluate talent is too much to ask. Make it make sense. The ripple effects of this incompetence are everywhere. Remember when they let Christy Sides go and brought in Stephanie White? We all thought it was about upgrading the coaching. But what if the coaching was never the real problem? What if the issue is that the front office is giving coaches a roster built on YouTube recommendations and friendship networks? This also explains why the Fever have been so inconsistent this season. They're currently sitting at 18-15, fighting for a playoff spot when they should be competing for a championship. How can you build chemistry when you're signing players you've never properly evaluated? How can you implement a system when you don't know if your players can actually execute it? The most damaging part might be the message this sends to Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham. These are elite players who want to win championships. They're watching organizations like Las Vegas and New York build super teams through smart scouting and player development. Meanwhile, their own team is admitting they use Google and group chats to find players. How long before they start wondering if they need to find a team that actually takes winning seriously? Speaking of Caitlin, let's not forget that she specifically asked Stephanie White for the scouting report the Sun used against her in the playoffs. She's obsessed with improvement, studying film, understanding the game at the highest level. Imagine her reaction when she finds out her own team doesn't even have proper scouting reports on potential teammates. The disconnect is mind-blowing. And what about international players who might want to come to the WNBA? If you're playing overseas and you know the Fever don't have scouts watching you, why would you ever consider Indianapolis as a destination? They're essentially telling the global basketball community that they don't care enough to evaluate talent properly. Here's the thing. Scouting isn't just about finding players. It's about understanding how players fit together, identifying specific skills that complement your stars, and building a roster with purpose. The Fever are basically throwing darts at a board blindfolded and hoping something sticks. The solution is obvious, but apparently too complicated for the Fever's front office. Hire professional scouts, not part-time consultants, not friends of coaches. Real, dedicated scouts who watch games, compile reports, and understand basketball at a deep level. Have at least 2 international scouts covering Europe, Asia, and Australia have domestic scouts watching college games and tracking WNBA free agents. This isn't revolutionary, it's basic professional sports management. If you're as frustrated as I am about this situation, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment about what the Fever need to do to fix this mess. Should they fire the front office? Should they bring in new ownership? The discussion needs to happen because this level of incompetence cannot continue. The irony is that the Fever actually have the pieces to be great. Caitlin Clark is a generational talent who's revolutionizing the game. Sophie Cunningham brings veteran leadership and elite shooting. Aaliyah Boston is becoming a dominant force in the paint. Kelsey Mitchell can score with anyone. Nalissa Smith has tremendous potential. But without proper roster construction through professional scouting, all that talent is being wasted. What's particularly frustrating is that this revelation came out almost by accident. White wasn't trying to expose the organization's failures. She was just answering questions honestly, which makes you wonder, what other amateur hour practices are happening behind closed doors that we don't know about? The comparison to how Caitlin Clark approaches the game makes this even more embarrassing. She's known for her meticulous preparation, studying hours of film, understanding every opponent's tendencies. She represents excellence and professionalism. Meanwhile, her organization is out here using WhatsApp messages and YouTube searches to build a roster. The contrast couldn't be more stark. And let's not forget the broader context here. The WNBA is growing rapidly. Television ratings are up. Attendance is breaking records. Corporate sponsors are investing millions. This is the moment when organizations need to step up and match the league's ambition. Instead, the Fever are operating like it's still 1997. The fact that Stephanie White had to leave the team briefly for personal reasons earlier this season now takes on new meaning. Imagine trying to coach at the highest level when your front office is giving you players they found through Instagram DMs. The stress must be overwhelming. Here's what needs to happen immediately. First, Kelly Krauskopf and Amber Cox need to explain this disaster to the fans. No corporate speak, no deflection. A real explanation of why they don't have professional scouting in place. Second, they need to announce a plan to hire at least 5 full-time scouts before next season. Third, they need to show Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham that this organization is serious about winning. The alternative is too depressing to consider. If the Fever continue down this path, they risk wasting the Caitlin Clark era. They risk becoming a laughingstock in a league that's finally getting the respect it deserves. They risk losing not just games, but an entire generation of fans who came to watch excellence and instead got incompetence. The most maddening part is that this is such an easy fix. Scouting isn't some mysterious art that only a few people understand. There are hundreds of qualified basketball minds who would love to scout for a WNBA team. The Fever just need to actually hire them instead of relying on text messages and highlight reels. As we wrap this up, remember that this isn't just about one bad signing or one embarrassing admission. This is about an organizational culture that doesn't prioritize the basic fundamentals of professional sports. It's about a front office that thinks they can compete at the highest level while cutting corners on essential operations. The ball is in the Fever's court now. They can either address this scandal head-on and make real changes, or they can continue pretending that YouTube scouting is acceptable in professional basketball. But make no mistake, if they choose the latter, they're not just failing their fans. They're failing Caitlin Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and every player who deserves better. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because we're going to be following this story closely. The Fever's response, or lack thereof, will tell us everything we need to know about whether this organization is serious about winning championships or content with mediocrity. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Remember, real championship organizations invest in every aspect of basketball operations. They scout professionally, develop strategically, and build with purpose. The Indiana Fever just admitted they do none of those things. The question now is whether they're willing to change, or whether Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham will have to find an organization that actually knows how to win. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.